Hey folks, Nick Jennison for Thinking About Guitar, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about a unit that has absolutely transformed the way that I work in my little studio. This guy, I happen to have two kicking around right now, is the N-Audio 8x7 amp switcher, and this little device allows me to plug in all of these beautiful amplifiers that I have sat behind me that I'm ashamed to say, up until now, I haven't really been using. I've been doing most of my work through my Victory Super Kraken, which is my favorite amp, let's be honest, but I've had all these gorgeous amps and I've sat and wondered, hey, what would it be like if I plugged into my little 20-watt JCM 800, or if I plugged into my PRS Archon for this particular project, and then just didn't, because it's such a pain in the neck to uncable and recable everything. And yes, the Super Kraken can do a whole bunch of sounds, but the amount of sounds that I have available and the variety of sounds I have available right now because of this switcher, unbelievable. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my new workflow and show you how this switcher fits into my setup and also how it may fit into yours. Now, a quick word on the company in question. N-Audio are a company out of Bulgaria. Our friend Nikki, who I was lucky enough to meet at Guitar Summit, was kind enough to do me a fantastic deal on not one, but two of these switchers, hence why there's two of them. This is going into another studio. Man, I gotta say, right, he has really been kind to us. He's really looked after us. And I'm making this video to show you how I'm using this as something of a thank you, but it's not some kind of official arrangement. So this is not a sponsored video, although I did get a very good deal on this product, so I am somewhat biased about how good it is. But as I'm sure you'll see, I think that bias is warranted. Anyway, before we go any further, let me take you on a quick tour of the amps that I have plugged into my switcher. Now, we can plug up to 8 amps and up to 7 cabinets into the N-Audio switcher. I have the following. Let's go to the close-up. On slot number 1, I have my PRS Archon, which you can see down here. It's a combo format amp. I'm only using the amplifier portion of this. I'm actually using the tube amp expander down here. I'm using the speaker output to feed the speaker on this amplifier. I'll tell you about that in a second. On number 2, we have my Super Kraken. On number 3, it's a Victory Super Jack. And then completing the Super Trilogy, we have the Super Sheriff on number 4. On slot number 5, I have a 20-watt Marshall JCM 800. It's the Studio Classic model. On number 6, we have a Victory Copper, which is the AC type amplifier. On number 7, we have a Victory Duchess, which is the cream guy over here. Beautiful pedal platform amp. And then finally, on number 8, we have a 20-watt Marshall Super Lead, and this is the Studio Vintage model, which again is a combo kicking around over this side, which I do take out occasionally to power my Quad Cortex on stage, but I love the way this sounds, and I'm only using the amplifier portion of this amp. Let me take you on a quick tour of the various amps. We're not going to do all the sounds. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'll just give you a quick rundown and then we'll talk more about the switcher, its spec, and how I'm using it.
That's just a little smattering of tones that I have available with the N audio switcher, just one from each of the amplifiers. Of course, many of these amps are channel switching, so I have access to a whole range of tones, and I will show you as many of those as I can a little bit later on when we start talking about the way I've set this up with MIDI. But before we do that, let's talk a bit about the unit itself. Now, the N audio 8x7 switcher allows you to combine up to 8 amplifiers with up to 7 cabinets and a power attenuator. Now, I could have run this with the tube amp expander in the power attenuator slot and ran it out to several real cabinets, should I have desired. I'm not doing that just yet because I only use the real cabinet in my PRS Archon, the real speaker, for monitoring in my studio. Everything else we do with IRs, I have IRs that I really like. It keeps everything controlled and keeps things consistent from video to video and from project to project. It makes reamping really easy, all that sort of business, and we'll talk more about reamping in a second, but I could do it that way. Instead, what I've got is I have my tube amp expander in cabinet slot number 1. Now, eventually, I'm going to get around to building an ISO booth, which will live probably on the roof of this studio. We're in a little studio complex, and I've got some space above me where I could potentially put a 4x12, but we'll figure that out perhaps later on. Anyway, I have my 8 amplifiers plugged in. We have a mute switch, an input for your guitar over here. I'm going to talk to you about the first mistake that I made with this in a second with regards to that input and maybe some of the disappointment that I had when I first plugged this in. Suffice to say that is very much gone now. And up to 7 cabinets. Now, what you can do with this, I'll show you on the actual switcher, is the actual one that's plugged in, that is, we can switch between these either manually or via MIDI, which is the way I was doing it in the very intro, switching it using my Boss ES8, which has got some pedals in the loop as well. We can switch cabinets manually, but you'll notice that I only have one cabinet plugged in. I am unable to select the cabinets. The switcher won't let me select the cabinets that aren't connected. And this means that I can't accidentally send my amp to a situation where it has no cabinet. We all know for valve amplifiers, that's a bit of a nightmare. Now, this will also support solid state amps and will support mono bridged power amps too, which is kind of crazy. I think it goes up to about 1,000 watts. And as far as I'm aware, there is no 1,000 watt guitar amp out there. If you can think of one, hey, fair play. But if you have a Marshall Major, maybe 200 watts or 150 watt rectifier, you are safe to use this, provided your cabinet can handle it. And to that end, we can actually use up to 3 cabinets at once. And you can even set up MIDI presets where you switch between combinations of amps and cabinets and the on-off state of the power attenuator. You can also even use this without a cabinet attached with just the power attenuator engaged, although you do have to go through some pre-flight checks to do that, just to make sure that you don't do it accidentally and send your unloaded amp signal through to no cabinet. Now, speaking of load, every inactive amplifier, when we have an amplifier switched off, let's say I'm on amp 2 right now, which is the Super Kraken, all of the other amps are
having their inputs essentially sent no signal at all. So nothing is being sent to the inputs of those amplifiers, and their speaker outputs are being loaded down with a permanent resistive load. So the amplifiers are always seeing load. They're never going to be in a situation where they're just sending their power to nothing, which keeps them nice and safe. Now, very quickly, what I'm going to do, I'm going to power the amps down, and I'm going to show you what happens when you power this up, because there's another safety feature in there too. Let's take a look at that now. Okay, so the amps are powered off. Let's switch the N audio switcher on and see what it does. Notice it does this little boot up sequence. And now I have a green LED for my selected cabinet. This means that this cabinet is available as an option. I can't select any other cabinets. I can only select this one. But what you'll notice is that in this state, I can't select an amplifier. It will not let me switch an amp on until I select a cabinet. Then I'm free to select an amp. Let's get them switched back on and see what kind of noises we can make. All right, so the amps are back on. We're going to talk a little bit about connectivity here. So I'm going to flip this around and show you the back of it. Now, this is where we see a whole host of ins and outputs. And we're going to begin with this part. This, to my mind, is one of the best features about the N audio switcher compared to some of its contemporaries. And it's the fact that it doesn't use an external power supply. It uses an internal IEC cable. This is a big deal because sometimes these barrel style power supplies, it's not a regular thing. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but sometimes these barrel style power supplies can go bad. It can mean that you don't have an earth connected to your switcher. All sorts of badness happens. So this means that not only can I replace the power supply in an instant should it go wrong with just another IEC cable, but it means that it is permanently grounded. It's a little touch, but I think this makes a bit of a big deal. Now, over at this end, we have inputs for the guitar, which is different to the input on the front. You'll notice we have a guitar in here, which I'm not using. I'm using the one on the back, and this one is defeated if you plug a guitar into the front. So it means you can have your rig permanently in, but if you just want to plug a guitar straight into the front, you can easily do that too. We have a tuner output, and then some sends to our amplifier in, 1 through 8, and then some returns from the amplifier's speaker output. So the way you set this up is you plug this jack, let's say amp number 1, which I've got for my PRS Archon, that goes to the amplifier's input. This is where you plug the amplifier's speaker output in. You make sure that you connect amplifier 1 to 1 on both ends. Don't mix that up. That could go very badly. And what that also means is that then any amplifiers that aren't connected, say 2 and 2, when you have 1 active, it's not going to send any signal out of this, and this will be sent to a resistive load, which means it is safely loaded down. Now, we have a power attenuator insert here. Again, send and return. If you have something like an Iron Man, you could plug it in there. And this is where the cabinets come out. We've got up to 7 cabinets, and you can use up to 3 of those simultaneously. We also have MIDI in and out. I'll talk to you about the MIDI in a second, but I want to talk about the guitar in and out very quickly and all of these signals here. Now, the entire signal path is completely analog true bypass. The only thing that is being controlled is the relay switching between the what's on and what's off, what goes to the resistive load, what goes to your cabinets, etc. So there are no buffers at play here, and I actually made the mistake of plugging my guitar into the front with some long cables going to the amplifier inputs, and I was a little disappointed with the sound. I was like, oh man, this thing's killed a load of my high end. It turns out I was essentially running something like 60 foot of guitar cable, because I was running my pedal board into the front of this, which is maybe 20 foot, and then I had another 10 foot guitar cable. I didn't have my buffer switched on, and then I ran from there into another 30 foot of cable going to my amplifier. Essentially, the guitar was seeing a massive load because there is no buffer in this. So it behooves you, if you're using very short cables, you're okay, but if you're using long cables, it will behoove you to run a buffer in front of the N audio switcher. And I think that's a good choice. Rather than having a buffer built in, which you have to run through, this means you have the option, and many good high quality buffers are available. A Boss tuner will do the trick, truthfully. But once I switched that back on, it was plain sailing. It was definitely just teething issues. And I was very impressed with the clarity of the tone. I just thought it made my guitar sound a bit weird. And as soon as I switched the buffer on, it went back to normal. So that's something to be aware of. Now, in terms of cabling, you are going to need an absolute crap ton of cables. And I'm lucky enough to have a relationship with D'Addario where I can get a load of cables, if not for free, then cheap. But believe me, this took a bit of wiring up, and I made some labels for everything. The labels are peeling off, which is quite annoying, but I just need a better label maker, I think. But even still, we needed at least 8 guitar cables and at least 8 long speaker cables, plus some ones I already had to go to the cabinet and to go to the front of the thing. It was a whole big deal. It took me a little over an hour and 15 minutes. You'll be seeing some sped up footage of me rigging the thing up, but once I did, it is very much set and forget. Now, I've been running this with MIDI so that I can essentially set up presets and I can switch channels on the amplifiers behind me using a combination of the control outs on my Boss ES8 and a Voodoo Lab control switcher, which basically gives me access to how many presets have I dialed up here. I think I have something like 6, 12, 18, 20 presets dialed up, which is crazy when you think about it. But it means that I essentially have a patch for each amplifier and each amplifier channel that I'm likely to use. There's 1 or 2 that I'm not using because I'm not a huge fan of the way they sound, but I'm using most of them. And on those patches, I can also use relevant effects that I think kind of work with that particular patch. I can switch them in and out with my toes, which is nice and easy. So the way this is running is I'm going into my guitar. This is a full signal chain rundown. I'm going in from my guitar into my pedal board. And from there, I'm taking a DI directly from the guitar and recording a DI track at all times, which means I can reamp if I need to. I'm then running into the front end of this Strymon Mobius for some effects. That's going into the guitar input via the Kernon bridge as well, I should point out, my favorite fuzz, running into the guitar input of the N audio switcher. That then goes to the amplifiers and it comes back and is fed into the Boss tube amp expander. I then have the second half of the Strymon Mobius doing my post effects. So I have things like phasers and univibes in front and things like chorus, tremolo, etc. in the rear end. That's in the effects loop of the Waza tube amp expander. And then I'm sending the 3 XLR outputs of the Waza tube amp expander to 3 separate channels on my audio interface. The mono 2 FOH output is going straight to the audio interface, which is a Focusrite Claret 8 pre, in case you're wondering. So, you know, mid-range interface, nothing fancy going on there, but a nice one all the same. It's going directly there with no effects applied, but then the left and right lineouts are being fed into my Strymon Timeline and Strymon Big Sky, which essentially gives me a wet, dry, wet rig. And that enables me to record wet effects, but also record a dry signal and also record a DI, which is like a double safety net. If I feel like the wet effects are too wet, I can blend some dry in, or I can just use the dry signal, or I can reamp if I need to. It's a lot of stuff, but it is so good. It is so much fun. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my guitar again, and I'm going to run you through the 20 presets that I have, and I'm going to talk you through each one, I think. I'll try my best to, and I'll talk you through the effects that we've got going on and how they are switched. Let's grab a guitar and take a listen. So the way I have this rigged up is I have my Boss ES8 on the floor, which is doing MIDI switching. It's also switching some pedals in and out, although I don't have anything on any of the presets. That's just something I can add in and out if I feel like I want to. I have several fuzzes on there. I have my favorite pedal, which is a Boss Waza HM2. Crazy sounding pedal. Absolutely love it. It's very situational, but I'm really, really into it. A lot of fuzzes, a compressor, a tube screamer. I have a Coco Boost. I have a wah pedal, etc. That's all just stuff that I can stack onto existing sounds, but that's doing the MIDI switching. And then I have it set up into 3 banks. I have a clean bank, kind of a mid-gain Marshally bank, and then a high-gain bank. And each bank has 6 presets. And then I have 2 additional presets on each bank, which are on 7 and 8, which are the same in every bank. And they're my 2 preferred lead sounds, which basically means whichever bank I'm on, I can go to a solo tone. Because you guys know I like to play lots of notes. I like my solo sounds. And that is a Victory Super Jack and a Victory Super Kraken on the overdrive channel voice 1. And then on the Super Kraken, it's gain 2 with the focus engaged. And they always have reverb and delay on. I can switch it on and off, but you get the gist. Anyway, let's start with the clean bank. And we're beginning with one, which is the Archon Clean, one of my favorite cleans. Sounds thus. I should point out that you're hearing everything through the Waza tube amp expander, and we're using one IR for the whole thing today, which is my favorite solo IR. It's a Celestion Lynchback. I have a selection of modulation effects. We've got tremolo, and that is in the effects loop. That's the second half of the Mobius. A chorus. Now those are in mono, but because the tube amp expander has a bit of room mic going on, it has a little bit of a stereo thing going on. We also have reverb and delay, courtesy of the Timeline and Big Sky, 2 varieties for this. That's my favorite shimmer reverb, and then I have a bigger one over here. Let's put the chorus on too. Next up, on patch number 2, we have the Super Jack clean, which is here. A little more mid-rangey, same effects, tremolo and chorus are available, but this time I have the big shimmer reverb. And on all of my other clean effects, including the Super Jack or my clean bank, I have a slapback with some spring. Next bank, or on the next patch, on 3, we have the Duchess. You'll notice that I'm switching presets. It's also switching on the N-Audio switcher too. Here's the Duchess. So a little fatter, a little thicker. I think I have it a little louder too. I should probably fix that, but we'll get to that. Little tremolo. A little bit of slap. Copper is next. A little bit of chorus for some Brian. I have a treble booster kicking up there on that shelf over there. I'll get to that eventually when we do some Brian sounds one of these days. On 5, we have the Kraken's clean, which I've cranked because now I don't need to keep it clean. I don't need to keep switching. I like the sound of it cranked. It's a big pushed clean tone. And then the Kraken clean with the focus engaged. And that, with a little bit of slapback, is one of my favorite slide tones. So let's grab a slide. I've got one in my pocket. Let's take a listen to how that sounds. Really juicy, very beautiful tone. Now, moving on to the next bank, I do have access to my 2 solo sounds, which are the Super Jack and the Super Kraken. We'll get to those. They're on every bank. But moving on to the next bank, we have the mid-gain Marshall-y type bank, starting with the Super Sheriff on its vintage mode, which sounds like this. And for all of the amps in this block, we have a Univibe. And that's in front of the amplifier. We also have access to the same tremolo as before. And that's in the effects loop and a chorus. Also in the effects loop, because chorus is fun. And then I can stack some reverb and delay on if I want to. And that is only running through the 2 wet signals. So the dry signal is still completely bypassing the reverb and delay. Lots of fun. That's the vintage Sheriff tone. Next up, we've got the crunch channel on the Super Jack. Not a great deal of difference, but definitely rounder. The Sheriff. The Jack is a little leaner on the low end, a bit more focused, really good for some ambient effects. Moving on, the next one we've got is the 20-watt Marshall Plexi, which is the studio vintage, sounds like this. Again, very distinct from the other 2 amps. It has something of its own going on. It's a little less refined, definitely a bit more Marshall, a bit less kind of idealized Marshall. Again, quick run through those. Sheriff, Jack, Plexi, something different in the mid-range. Now, if you didn't have the capacity to switch between those amplifiers at that little rate of knots, which I didn't have the capacity to do a little while ago, I would never have picked up on those subtle differences. Your audio memory is so short that unless you can A/B between things through the same cabinet and through the same signal chain, it's very hard to accurately discern the differences between them. But anyway, on we go. Here's my plexi. Here is the 20-watt JCM 800. And with all of these amps, and all of the clean amps and dirty amps too, I can throw pedals on top, so we could put a tube screamer on. Bit of reverb and delay too. Very cool. Next two sounds are the Super Sheriff, once again on the Hot Rod channel this time. Bigger, brighter, thicker, slightly more scooped sounding, but generally more hyped than the JCM 800. That's Hot Rod Voice 1, and for more gain, we have Voice 2. Now, I've deliberately set that to be brighter than the Marshall amplifiers because I already have that flavor, and I have some dark sounding amps which will do the same sort of thing, which we'll explore in a second. Quick reminder, that's what it sounds like. Here is the high gain bank, which starts with the Kraken's Gain 1. Dark and thick. Quick comparison between the Kraken's Gain 1 and the Super Sheriff. That's the Kraken. Here's the Super Sheriff. Here's Super Sheriff on Gain 2. Here's the Super Kraken on Gain 1. Noticeably darker and thicker. Then we've got number 2, which is the Super Kraken's Gain 1 with the focus engaged. So super thick and mid-range focused. Channel 3 is something of a departure. Here, what I have is a fuzz, and that is going through the Kraken Gain 1. Now, the reason that I have a dedicated fuzz setting on this is I actually want the buffer to be switched off going into my fuzz. I don't want my buffer engaged feeding into the fuzzes, so this is the only patch where I don't have a buffer switched on, and it's going to lead the guitar to sounding somewhat dark and muddy were I to switch the fuzzes off, but this is just one of those kind of situational things that I felt like I needed. Of course, if I was using the Kernom, which I can stack on other stuff too, that wouldn't be a problem because the Kernom is essentially immune to buffering. But let's check out a couple of cool fuzzes. There's my favorite fuzz that's not the Kernom, which is a Boss Wazza fuzz. Let's stack a green ringer into that. And while we're here, let's check out the HM2. A thoroughly chaotic and very noisy pedal. I've got to switch that off quite quickly. A lot of fun. Of course, I should point out at this point, I've got my fuzz. If I wanted to throw that to any of the other amps, I'm not limited to the amp that I've got switched up here, so I could easily set it to the Duchess, for example. And If I wasn't into that, I could send it to the Super Sheriff, let's say, or Super Jack. Super Sheriff, maybe. Very thick and dark sounding. Let's send it to the Plexi. That's going to be a little noisy, so we'll go back to our Duchess. Anyway, I digress. On number 4, we have the Archon, and this is the only amp sound that I have something permanently engaged with. This is the Archon's lead channel, and I have a tube screamer on this patch because the Archon without it is a little bit muddy for my liking. So the tube screamer is always on for this particular patch, but I can engage it for any of the others too. It sounds like this. Moving on, we've got the Kraken on voice number 2, the Super Kraken. This is gain 2 without the focus engaged. And then finally, we have the same deal, but this time it is the Kraken with the focus engaged. And comparing that to the Archon very quickly. Kraken. Lots and lots and lots of fun. Now, the last 2 presets are ones that I have on every bank, and these are my 2 lead tones. They both have the same effects on them at all times, which I can switch off. It's a reverb, it's a delay. There's 2 of them. It's the Super Jack on its overdrive channel, which I think is a great sounding lead tone. And then my favorite, which is the Super Kraken on gain 2 with the focus engaged. Let's start with the Super Jack, which sounds like this. And then the Super Kraken, which is a little less old school. And both of them have access to a handful of effects. We have a univibe. I do like a univibe. I have a phaser for those Van Halen moments. And of course a chorus. Those 2 are in front of the amplifier. The chorus is in the loop. So an absolute rainbow of tones. There are so many cool usable tones here. And the beautiful thing about this is I actually get to use all my amps and I get to be inspired by plugging into them. I play a little differently through every one of them. The guitars respond a little differently through each one. So the combinations, I'm sure you can imagine, are endless. I have the effects to stack on top, but I also have this super quick workflow where I can just find the amplifier I want. It's set up, it's ready to go. I have a number of IRs I can choose between on my tube amp expander. I can also play with the load settings if I want a little more high end, a little more low end. It really is a beautiful setup. If I want some speaker in the room, I can turn this speaker knob up and down. It'll bring a little bit of the PRS combos speaker in with whichever amplifier I happen to have active. It's a fabulous setup. It's just so inspiring. So easy and so quick, I can't begin to tell you. And of course, it sounds fantastic. All of my amps are safe. I can't possibly damage them using this switcher. I gotta tell you, I'm over the moon, and it's so fast. It's so quick. Now, once again, this has been a look at the N Audio 8x7 amp switcher. Of course, I am biased, right? Nikki did me a great deal on these two units. This is going into a different studio, of course, but this is not a sponsored video. This video was not part of the arrangement. I just wanted to show you my new setup because I'm really excited about it, and it's something I'm going to be using going forward. And I wanted to show you how it all works because I think it's pretty cool. And we're all nerds here. We all like to look at nice new guitar gear and cool setups. Once again, this is the N Audio 8x7 amp switcher. My name's Nick Jennison for Thinking About Guitar. I'll see you again very soon.